Now, the first land summit was held at State House today. And of course, those two issues, that is land grabbing and historical injustices, dominated discussions today at State House. And with me to talk more on the same is Principal Secretary at the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, that is Mariamu El Maawy. Now, I'll pronounce it properly. Well, thank you for making time for us. Now, of course, one thing we cannot ignore is the issue of the Cyol land. Now, the governor looked very frustrated. He seems to be pushing this issue, but he's getting another, obstacle from the defense forces at the lands ministry. Who owns this land?
Well, thank you, Gladys. Now, this is somewhat new. We are more used to people grabbing land from public bodies, not public bodies coming in to grab land. So this is somewhat rather unusual. I'd say at this point we need to look at the records to be able to determine that exactly who owns this land, because the governor did come out rather strongly with his claim of the former city council having bought this land for housing purposes. What I do know is that the KDF has been very keen of late to secure whatever land that they have, being that there has been a lot of encroachment on their land in the past. And this is an active exercise that they're doing also with support from the ministry as well to survey and title their land. So I would say that this needs some work to go back into the records to determine whether on the side of governor. If you were watching the summit this morning, there was something that the chairman of National Land Commission said as some of the challenges that we faced in the past, that you had a situation where the Commissioner of Land may have given land to a public body or to allocated it to some, and likewise the municipal has also gone into a similar activity of ownership as well, and they were not talking to one another, that you wouldn't know what the municipal has done or the city hall has done, and the commissioner would also not have informed what the municipal or the city hall has done. So I see here a typical case of double claim. Okay. To the same piece of land. I see here a typical case of double claim to the same piece of land that arises out of situations such as this. And we need to look at who made their claim first, which is a review that is normally undertaken by either the National Land Commission or we investigate in our records to see if something like that did happen and if each of the two institutions actually have a claim. And how did that claim arise? Yes.
Okay, let's go to Grabioses, as the CS called it. Now, the Easily land market has been a thorn in the flesh. It seems not to go away. NLC Chair Mohammed Swazuri was there and he declared the land to be public land and all the construction should stop. That has not stopped. Why is this an issue that will not rest yet? We know who owns this land.
Yes, you see, the challenges that we are facing in the land sector and the reforms that we are trying to bring in, it's almost like out there people have this sense of disbelief. They think that they will continue as they had in the past. Now, we are, all of us as Kenyans, and particularly the bodies that have been charged with that kind of responsibility, we must protect our public utilities. Those are the first places that we have had challenges with. And if today we are able to say with certainty that this belongs to the market and the developer is still continuing, then it means that somewhere along the line we still haven't got our act together completely. So really that developer must move out. And the law enforcement agencies also have to be able to kick in and help us into this, as well as the county government. Now, when you see some of these agencies not quite working the way they should, then we still have problems in that area. So if today we are saying here is an institution that's supposed to look into these matters of public land and is declared quite openly that this is what it ought to be, they really must move out and the market must be sustained.
Okay, so the Easterly land market, we've seen the 8 billion shillings current land also on the headlines, Langata Road Primary School. I mean, the list goes on and on. The question here is the government unable to deal with these cartels, with these fraudsters? What are we saying is the circumstances surrounding this whole situation?
Well, Gladys, what I'm happy about myself is that now this kind of information is available. That alone speaks to the fact that some work is being done and these matters are being exposed, and they're being exposed in early days, not as stories of the grabiosis that took place then, and the development has already taken place, and you have a big building there, and then you have, you know, a dilemma as to what to do going forward. So being able to nip it in the bud is a good sign, and then we need to get a lot more proactive about it. Schools are exposed. Okay, schools in Kenya, a number of schools in the urban areas are exposed because they're sitting on incredibly prime land. And sometimes it calls for the question as to whether to review some of these land uses, correct? If they are beginning to look like they are better utilized as other facilities. However, we must also sustain and encourage for their use as community centers and as schools as well. So this is a step in the right direction, that we're beginning to get this information, and we're also happy that the media is coming in right now far much more positively than even that they used to say a year ago, 2 years ago, when they would sensationalize it and give us even more challenges in the area. Okay. So let's all work together in this manner. All
right, before I let you go, the CAS talked of dealing with cartels within the lands ministry, accusing them of derailing the government's agenda, of course, which is to serve all and equally. Has anyone so far been brought to book?
Well, the answer is yes, and we may not shout about it as much as people would want us to, because a typical case of land corruption or any type of corruption, when you apprehend one person, you also want to be able to find the rest of the network. Because in 2014, a number of senior officers were removed from the ministry. In 2015, a good number of them went to court. 2 chief land registrars are out in as many years. I don't have a chief land registrar as we speak because the matters are still in court. But then you see it is a network, and sometimes you are not really, you're constrained to be able to say much about it until you can be able to let the investigators. The CS also talked a lot about investigations and the investigations being undertaken. 2 things that we have done at the ministry that is radically different from the way work has been done. If you come to a national titling center right now, it pretty much looks like your newsroom down here. It's a big open plan space with 120 people on workstations, pretty much like the newsroom down here. And we did the same to the leasing department. You know, it was quite radical. For 2 weeks, people went home on leave. When they came back, they found all the walls had been broken down, and it's a fully automated system where they can all see one another. So these are some of the administrative measures that we are bringing in to be a little bit more transparent. In titling right now, we have a complete audit trail, and the titles are digitized, and you can know exactly who worked on it at the time. In leasing, it's about 60% on an audit trail, 60% automated, because leasing also requires approval from other agencies, and we're going to work on our connectivity with them. That sounds very technical, but we actually learned from the media. We borrowed from the media industry when you went from manual to digital, and set up all these open workstations. And that's exactly what our titling center and our leasing center. Now we are going to duplicate this kind of look in all our digitized registries. And we're going to have connectivity in the 13 registries, which means from Nairobi you can see what Kisumu is doing. From Kisumu you can see what Mombasa is doing. And that's the journey that we intend to go on.
Okay, all the best.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us. I was speaking to Principal Secretary at the Ministry of Lands. Her name is Mariamu El Maawy.